for coming out today. We appreciate you guys being here. We are in Topeka, Kansas. Beautiful Topeka, Kansas. We are at the Capitol, and we wanted to bring countless families concerned in the great state of Kansas. We aren't sure why these concerns still go on. If you haven't been on this side of the table and you're a parent with a child that doesn't have a disability, this might seem outlandish. It might seem like it's made up, but it is a situation that is pervasive, that happens to parents with kids with disabilities, and we make it unbelievably hard for them to access what they're supposed to have by state and federal law. State law, which is funded, and federal law, which is funded. And so, if we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, helping everyone who sits at the 504 IEP table navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And it's our job as advocates, and advocates are everybody that sits at the table to help a child with a disability bring the truth to the forefront. Because the truth is, when we don't service kiddos that may be in need of special education related service in our 504 plan, we are heavily populating the prison pipeline. The percentage of juveniles in juvenile detention centers that have a learning disability, not a behavior disability, not a bad situation in their home, but an actual learning disability, the numbers are staggering. And it has to stop, and it has to be not some little secret, not some little dirty secret that is special education. Every child in the school building is a general ed student. Special ed students simply need a higher level of support than the general ed teacher can provide them solely, right? If your child was in athletics and you got them extra help through coaching, that would be something extra that they needed. And so these children, which are a very large amount of children, need support. So the national average for children with special education needs are 12.9%. Pediatricians would say somewhere between about 25%. And so we have made it an almost insurmountable mountain for parents in Kansas to get children their special education and related services. And we blame it on a myriad of things, and I'm here to call bologna sauce on all of it. We can't blame it on anything. It's a choice. It's a choice to serve children with disabilities. It's also a choice to deny them their civil right, and it's also a choice to deny them federal and state rights of special education. So one of the first problems here in Kansas is that we have a little program called Child Find. It's a federal requirement since 1975. In 1975, we passed the Educating All Children with Handicap Act. It became IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, in 1990. And it said it is ILE, that schools have to identify, locate, and evaluate children with suspected disabilities that may be in need of special education and or related services. And so, but we don't do that. I can rarely find ever a school district or a teacher that refers a student directly to special education testing. And who's going to know more and quicker than the school-based members? And the reason that we don't refer is simply this, because we've taught teachers to shh, don't say anything. My son was in special education in the mid-90s, and the problem that was in the mid-90s is just as pervasive today in 2022. So teachers who are amazing, and we love teachers, God bless teachers for serving our kiddos, but they're not allowed to tell the parents that there's an educational need. They literally, if they tell a parent in Kansas there's an educational need, they have to say, listen, your son is really struggling, your daughter's struggling, but you need to ask for the testing. I can't ask for it, and whatever you do not mention my name. Is that ridiculous? That we live in America, that we live in Kansas, and we can't let teachers who are the ones providing the instruction, identifying the intervention? Is that not ridiculous that they're not allowed to tell parents? And these teachers, because probably 20% of the families I serve are school-based members, they are either moved, removed, let go, their contracts aren't renewed if they tell parents that they need to have testing for special education. And I get it. I get that a special education child may be the most expensive child in your classroom, but you know what? They have equal access. They're supposed to have equity, just like you wouldn't come to a building and there wouldn't be a ramp. These children have the same legal rights that we very, very easily deny on a daily basis. And we've had enough of it. We're not going to go away. We're not going to be quiet. It has nothing to do with COVID. It has nothing to do with the teacher shortage. This behavior was happening in the 90s, and it has never stopped. And we have pressured teachers so much, it's just out of control. The other thing is we don't staff classrooms. We could. I've never seen, and I'm from the great state of Texas, and this is a great state of Kansas. I have family here. I've never seen a 7th grade coach running low on other coaches. I've never seen the science STEM running low on people. See, what we do is we fund what we care about. And if we cared about kids with disabilities that couldn't read, couldn't communicate, couldn't be successful socially, we would fund that. But it's hard for me to tell today that we care about that. What we care about is we have about 85% of all the money in education goes to the admin building. I have no idea why it goes to the admin building. It should go to the teachers. It should go to the paraprofessionals. It should go to everybody that's working hands-on with kiddos. And so we have to stop violating child find. It's a federal requirement. It's not an option. It's not a suggestion. And the assumption is that the school-based members are going to do what's right. And the school-based members do what's right when they're allowed to. But when you have leadership telling the teachers, do not say anything, they're not making it up. It's a systemic problem across the entire United States, which is why we're going to go to every capital and talk about this till there is systematic change and that there is funding. There are plenty of funds here. We have to apply them and appropriate them for kiddos with disabilities because they have every right to be successful. But we have a country of children and adults who are illiterate. Literally, they're illiterate because we just pass them through. We just pass them through. And I've been doing this for about 25 years, and it's unacceptable for any kid to fail now. We don't let kids fail anymore. That's a new secret policy we have in schools, right? Kids don't fail because we just test them and retest them. That's not learning. That's just retesting them so that they can pass the almighty state test. And it's got to change. We have got to support teachers, and we have got to support parents. And so children with disabilities are in need of special education and related services. And so let me give you an example of what related services are that are available at your school in Kansas, just in case nobody mentioned. Occupational therapy and sensory. So kiddos that have sensory needs, whether they're overwhelmed by sound, smell, volume of people, those sensory needs, when they're addressed, we can provide them support so they can stay in the classroom and be successful. Occupational therapy and written expression or refined motor, that ability to hold an instrument with correct mechanics. Those are all services that are provided at the school. Assistive technology and written expression, that ability to get your thoughts down on a piece of paper using the ease of technology. Assistive technology and communication. We have amazing VOCDs, voice output communication devices, but you know what? They cost money. So does everything else in a school, right? And so we have to give these kids access to these services to mitigate the impact of their disability. Music therapy intervention, counseling is a related service, physical therapy, O&M, Braille, there's an endless amount. But we keep parents at bay and don't tell them about these services, and it has to stop. In the Dyslexia Handbook in Texas, there's a great quote from Reading Rockets of 1999. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but it basically says this: children that are not successful readers as young people are unlikely to be successful in life. So we have kids that cannot read. We have 7th, 8th, 9th, 12th graders that cannot read. I have kiddos that are reading 3, 4, 5 years behind in school, and the school won't write them a goal for reading. Like, how far behind do they need to be? How do we keep recusing ourselves of our responsibility in Kansas to serve kids with disabilities? It's unacceptable, it's pervasive, and every family that I talk to says one word to describe special education. Just one word, and that's fight. And the fight's every year. We got to retell our story over and over again. We have to prove that our child can't read. We have to prove that our child can't regulate. That is ridiculous. And if you haven't had a child that struggled in any of these areas, because special education is an educational need, it's not an academic need. Stop telling us about their good grades. I don't believe your grades anymore. I don't believe anybody's grades. It's an educational need, right? Do they have a functional need, an emotional need, communicative, academics, behavior? And then we intervene and provide that student services and supports to mitigate the impact of their disability. Our job in special education is one thing: to teach children with disabilities strategies to self-manage that disability. But that has to come from the staff. It doesn't come from parents who are spending their money on every night of the week taking them to a private tutor. Because what we've taught kids is you go to school all day and you're unsuccessful, and now I've got to pay for you to go to school somewhere else. And so it has to stop. this not letting parents have testing has got to stop. Okay? So I'm going to ask this mom to come up, and you can bring up Theo. This is my mom, Tanya, and so she is in the process of her getting her child tested for special education and related services. And can you tell us about your experience of getting testing?
It has been very, very difficult. We have certain timelines that we have to follow under IDEA, but the schools don't follow them. I'm very lucky that he's transitioning from ECI, so that's been an easier process, but I know other parents that have 3-year-olds that are fighting, and they're contacting the schools and they're saying, hey, my child needs to get tested, and they're not hearing back. Or when my daughter was in school, it was, oh, we're monitoring her, it's going to be okay, we don't need to do testing. Or, oh, we have to do RTI first, we have to see how they are doing to have more data to determine if we need to test. Even when I have friends that have kids that have diagnosed disabilities, and they still are being denied testing and ignored and not provided the services that they need.
And how important is it to intervene the moment we know something's different? Theo struggles with language. Is it important to intervene right away?
It is a very critical and important, because the one thing we cannot get back is the time. I have been fighting for a year for him to have a VOCD to help him with his language and to support it, and it's been a battle. I have one right now, but it's been very difficult.
And do they ask you to justify why you want these tests?
Yes.
Okay. And that's not a federal requirement. Actually, there's no requirement to justify anything. You don't even have to have a diagnosis, which he does. You have to have a suspected disability. There's no suspect that he is language delayed. There's no suspicion that he has characteristics of autism. And yet we have to have meeting after meeting after meeting with somebody at the district level to see if they're going to grant their request. And parents are exhausted, and they go through such a process. When they finally get something, they're so excited. And usually that something doesn't begin to meet their child's needs. So we're going to keep fighting, and this has to stop. So thank you for sharing that story. As she talked about is, RTI is response to intervention. It's a requirement that all teachers do, and it just says that we can start doing something other above general ed, whether it's pulling them into small group. And I've got kiddos that have been in response to intervention for years. 5 days a week they have to be pulled into small group. At what point and test them for special education and related services? Because you know what? You are denying the child a future. You bring a child a future knowingly. And I don't know how administrators can deal with that and lay their head down at night, because it's completely unacceptable. One of the things about reading, which is so important, is that when you get your kids' reading levels, parents are like, oh, he's doing great, he's at an H. I'm like, he's in 5th grade. Did you know H is at the end of 1st grade? No, she just said he was a little bit behind. The other thing about reading that you should know, parents in Kansas, is that your reading level is being given after 60 seconds. 60 seconds. Not reading for 20 minutes. 60 seconds, they're measuring these kids' reading levels, and they are drowning. And so we have to change what's happening for parents. Well, we're not going to test, but you can, here's your dispute resolution options. If you want, you can process. That just rolls off our tongue in Kansas, right? If you don't like it, you can file due process. Why would we spend $600 an hour on school-based attorneys instead of supporting kiddos with identified disabilities? Why are we spending our focus on fighting parents instead of equipping kids? So we do have dispute resolution options, but parents should only have to exhaust them because they've done everything they could to support kids. So I'm going to call another mom up here, Sheila, whose daughter was struggling with reading. And so kind of tell us about your daughter's struggle with reading in school.
My daughter was in 1st grade when we really noticed that this is a problem. She started telling me that she could read with her eyes closed, and I was like, no, that's not possible. And so we loved our school, adored our school, adored the staff, the teachers were all amazing, but I knew something was wrong, and they kept pushing us off. And so I finally asked to see her file and all of her data, and I really didn't know what I was looking for, but thankfully I had a process engineering background and had friends that kind of knew the school system, and so I started piecing things together. And for me it was a little different because I actually found some data that it was a paragraph actually that she had apparently read, and there was one word that was highlighted. And so I went in and I was meeting with the principal. He was new that year, and I said, what is this one highlighted word? And he said, oh, that's the one word she missed. And I said, oh, wait a minute, that can't be. I'm telling you right now, she can't read the first word. It's Sue. It's long U. We struggled with that all year. She can't read play, can't read games. My head about exploded. And I said, what do you mean that there is only one word that she missed in this passage? And he kind of ignored it. I had a meeting the next day with a counselor and the teacher again, who I adored. We had been at the school for years with my older two kids. And we sat down, and they were very nervous and a little defensive at first. And I said, you know what, I'm not accusing you of anything. And so they actually sat down with me, and they said, okay, let's look at our process. And I said, great, I was a process engineer, let's look at it. And it was in the same room, all of these kids reading the same passages at the same time. And all of a sudden it clicked. I was like, oh gosh, she knows beginning sounds. She's such an amazing, and so she was guessing. Yeah. She heard the other children was guessing, and I just was like, my head was going to spin. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have data that shows progress. It still was poor. It still was way below grade level, way below 20 percentile. We're below 10 percentile, but a slope. And so I said, okay, this is a problem. You have bad data, and so I'm going to need you to get more data. And I know this is asking a lot at the end of the year, and he wasn't sure if he could do it, but he didn't have a choice, because I said, you're going to do this, and I believe you can. And he did, and he got 3 more data points, all just on his own, on her own, with him, and they all went back to her benchmark, and this was the last week of school. And so I was like, you're kidding me. That's a 0 slope. She's made no progress.
No progress.
Entire year. How is that possible? And you have data that's poor. Oh boy. And so I started advocating within our district, calling meetings, talking to superintendent, going to board meetings, getting myself in there and start a page for parents of struggling readers. And it just kind of blossomed, and then we got the IP. See, that's the thing. We got the IP, because what are they going to do? Like, we could have sued them, right? They had no bad data, and so they gave us the testing. We got the IEP, and then the services weren't enough, of course. So I was already getting private tutoring. And
like, how much they were doing. Let's talk about how much time has gone by while all the adults are figuring out who's so smart.
Right. This was like 9 months worth of time at least.
And you really had the ability to actually go into meet, because most parents would lose their job if they had other meetings.
Yep. I was lucky. I had the time to do this. I was a stay-at-home mom still, and I just poured myself into it as my full-time job. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fight for other kids. I don't want to just do this for my daughter. And then the more I got into it, I'm like, I have to get an IEP, because I have to see what they have. That was my purpose.
Right.
I wanted to see what kind of services they provided for kids, and it became worse and worse, because the services they had for the children that struggled the most were the worst. They were the most just inappropriate for teaching reading. They were whole language. They were not based in phonics, and it was heartbreaking, to be honest, because it started causing my daughter confusion with I became her tutor. I got grad credit. I went to the International Dyslexia Association approved class, and I learned what I needed to learn. Took over that, and let me tell you, tutoring your own child is probably one of the hardest things you have to do.
Because you're not my teacher.
Yeah. No, and I tell you what, she now wants me to go back tutoring her again, because we went from 1st to 75th percentile, and it was a process of 3 years, but the data showed it was really in about 7 months. After we moved her out of the district, unfortunately, we had to go to private school.
And why did you move her out of the district?
Because it became a fight, and they did some really nasty things to her. They were taking it out in the classroom.
So would they say stuff to her like, your mom wants a lot of meetings?
Not so much. No, it was they just weren't following her accommodations, and it put her in very poor positions. So she was with a couple of readers that were very strong readers. It was her turn to read. There was no staff member around, which was against her accommodations, and she started reading and did the best she could. And then said, "You read weird. I can't understand you. I should just read you."
One of the other children.
Can you imagine? She came home, she was furious, heartbroken, just angry, just I can't believe that. And I was like, oh my goodness. I had communicated, with the staff, and we loved her teacher. It wasn't their fault. All of the teachers were doing their best job. They were doing what they were trained.
Did she have a second teacher now that you
That was 3rd grade. That was 3rd grade by the time that happened.
But if you've identified this reading deficit, is the school now providing a
thankfully. It was sad, and it just was like, oh gosh, this is hard. But she was cooperating with me, at least working on the same site where we were, and then I was doing the phonics skills at home until COVID happened, and they sent home the legal binder, and I looked at it and I said, oh, this is worse than what they have in Tier 2. This is unacceptable. And I said, we will not use this with our daughter, and here's why. Here's how phonics works. Let me help you. And then it became a fight. The principal took over. I think the whole district took over. Like, you cannot let her win, because if she wins, she's already a whistleblower. It's going to explode on us. And so it became a fight. And I decided, you know what? Let me take reading off her IP, but maintain her IP. So let me ask for math services, because she was also lowest. She was first percentile. Should be easy,
and then
right?
math is going to add in reading, so that's going to always be a problem.
Right, exactly.
So
But I was taking care of the reading at home. Right? You know, I had bought the curriculum. I spent all this money. We started with a tutor originally. You know, we were invested in, and I was teaching her to read at home. So that wasn't a problem. But what they were doing in school was making it worse for her. It was confusing her. I mean, like, how horrible that is.
Right.
I'm already doing the school's job. You know, I've already decided I'm doing the school job. I'm not going to make you feel bad about that. But you're making my job worse, and that is unacceptable. And so it just became this huge fight. We asked for math services. They denied it. Didn't even get, it was supposed to be 8 data points.
Math services?
How do you deny it? And didn't get the 8 data points. Only got 6. Like, I ended up putting together an email, caught them in some legal things, and said, okay, here we go. So I went to the director of SPED, got it reversed. The lack of education at the very top of the district was just embarrassing. They didn't understand the way reading worked. And it just was like, I just was so distraught.
Do you think at the top they understand how the 115 pages of IDEA work?
No.
Do you think they understand how 504 works?
I think they were
Are we just
steeped,
winging it?
They were just really steeped in this just idea that they were God, that they were better than everyone.
They're the school.
They're the school. They're right, and everything, and they weren't. They didn't know what they were doing. They were trying their best. They kept telling me,
but your best
we're trying. It's going to take time. And it's
but
like,
your best can hurt somebody. Your best can hurt somebody.
Right. What about kids that don't have me as a mom? Don't have moms that can take that time, have single moms, or parents that don't have the kind of education that I have to learn this stuff.
Or they just take no and walk away and say thank you.
Right. And
then we fully trust the school system.
I know so many parents like this. I run a page and they're constantly telling me, like, this is what they're telling me, and they're doing their best and they don't understand it, and it's heartbreaking. Really is.
So Sheila, can you share with parents, you advocate all over, I advocate all over. A lot of parents even know there isn't what advocates are. Can you tell what an advocate does? Obviously, we know what an attorney does. We love attorneys, but once you get into attorneys, it's just attorneys talking to attorneys.
Right.
So kind of share with them what an advocate does, especially
an advocate pushes the boundaries. They push back and they say, okay, we want to see your data, we want to see your curriculum, we want to know when you tell us that our child is progressing, what does that mean?
Yeah.
We want to see the data. We want to see our child's scores against grade level. We want to see if they are progressing year to year. There should be a slope. They should be staying up, because once you get behind, it takes that much more to get caught up. So if year by year you're staying down here and it keeps going up, you're getting, that gap keeps getting bigger, and it's not going to just get better all of a sudden when you don't change what you're doing. She talked about the response to intervention, and that was just a joke, because my daughter is brilliant, and it's so exciting to see that now people understand that, and now she has got her sights on the sky. She wants to be a marine biologist and a zoo director and a famous actress and all these things, where before she thought she could only be a police officer because they didn't have to get an education. She didn't think she could go to college, and it was it's just, her life has been a 180, and it's great to see, but
and so
it's really hard.
What you did is you paid for that private coaching. You actually paid for the special ed, but that's available in every school in Kansas. Why do you think that doesn't happen?
I believe that, even though they have some of these services, I don't think that, because our colleges still are not teaching how you really teach reading to our teachers. And so our teachers, you get very set in your ways, and it becomes kind of a problem that they're just an issue that is one upon another. And so that, there needs to be more education, I think, overall in how you teach reading, trickle down, and the teachers in the classroom, and the tier 2 and the tier 3 teachers, reading specialists know what to do, and they understand fully and completely what the children need. Also, I think too, a lot of times kids with dyslexia need more one-on-one attention,
right?
Because when you're working with a group of 5 or 6, how are you supposed to individualize your education,
exactly.
right? Isn't that what an IEP is for? Individualized education plan. If you are working with several students, this student, really struggles with BD reversals. This student struggles with breaking apart sounds in a word. If they're on different levels, it's really hard for a teacher to be able to focus on each needs. And so that, to me, and you talked about a minute ago how they can be some of the most expensive, and I agree in the beginning. But something I've been saying to our Board of Education is that if you put the money in now at this early level, I'm telling you, it's going to pay off in the end, and you're actually going to do better. Because later on they're going to need less services in middle school and high school.
Thank you for sharing that.